Good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainable Mail Group's fourth symposium this year, Sustainability Best Practices for Direct Mail Marketing. My name is Ward Griffin and I'm the chairperson of the Sustainable Mail Group, which is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to making the direct mail industry more environmentally sustainable. Just some minor housekeeping details for this event. We're scheduled from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. this afternoon. You can ask questions using the chat or the Q&A function, but the questions won't be answered until the last 10 minutes of the event. The event is being recorded and will be posted to the Sustainable Mail Group's YouTube channel, where you can also find our last 3 events linked there to the channel and is visible in the chat right now. If you don't want to miss any of our content, I recommend that you subscribe to our channel and also click on the bell icon when you subscribe so you don't miss any content in the future. If you like what you see, please consider joining the Sustainable Mail Group at the link provided in the chat and become part of the community. We are currently looking to significantly expand our membership to support one of our core pillars, which is to build a community to share ideas. So we'd love to have you be part of that. So please consider joining. Now let me introduce our moderator for today's event, Eleanor Rafter. Eleanor is Director, Smart Mail Marketing Channels at Canada Post. She is part of the senior team that champions the enduring power of direct mail as a business builder for marketers in Canada. Eleanor has 25 years experience in direct marketing, and in her current position, she develops channel partnerships within the direct mail ecosystem. She has experience in business marketing and prior to joining Canada Post, focused on business development strategies in out-of-home advertising. Eleanor is also passionate in finding solutions within the industry to create sustainable mail. So over to you, Eleanor.
Thanks very much, Ward, and thanks for that introduction. Welcome, everybody. I believe from Andrew, we've got a great audience here this afternoon and really looking forward to this topic. As Ward said, it's near and dear to my heart, as it is, I think, to everybody who's on the webinar today. But before we start getting into deep into discussions, I'd like to just pass this over to Dave and Christina for them, our guest panelists, to introduce themselves. So Dave.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Dave Krawczyk. I am the Senior Director of Supply Operations for Lob.com. A little bit of my history. I have 30 years in the print industry, and with the last 20 of that in the digital print and direct mail business. And my responsibilities at Lob revolve around the actual physical delivery to our print delivery network and the manufacturing and then delivery of that product to the end recipient.
And Christina.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. I'm Christina Louis-Dyer, and I lead Lob's social impact and sustainability work. And so what this means for us is that we donate and discount our product for eligible nonprofits. We provide paid volunteer time off for employees, and we focus on integrating more sustainable practices into our business. And personally, my background is in the social impact in tech space, education. I was a former elementary school teacher and working with nonprofits.
Thank you, Christina. So first question, and I think I know Lob, and I've been, digging into all of the great information that you have on your website and etc. But I think for the audience, I wouldn't mind if you could give us just a bit of an overview on who is Lob and what role does Lob play in the direct mail industry?
Yeah, sure. So Lob.com is we are a software as a service company based out of San Francisco, and we operate our main product is our API, which is a computer-to-computer communication tool for direct mail marketers to be able to automatically communicate with our system the information for an end mail recipient and also sending creative. Our system then ingests that, puts it together through some of our technology, and then the back end, which is where my team comes in with the print delivery network. We then move that into the print delivery network to produce that mail and deliver it to its end recipients. So a very short summary, that's what we do. Complications come in as to actually the details of producing all that.
Excellent. And Dave, Christina, so when we were looking the Sustainable Mail Group, when we started to look at providing content to our members and just to the direct mail industry here in Canada, we were trying to look for best practices on how do you create sustainable mail. And one of the things that piqued our interest was when we went onto your site and we came across a great blog that was written that gave some tips and tricks in terms of here are the things that you as a printer could do or as a marketer could do to make your mail more sustainable. But we're curious as to, what was the inspiration for that blog? Was that driven by the needs of your customers, where you're getting requests from customers on how to create sustainable mail? Or was it part of your mandate as an organization? And was it driven by, what you wanted to be known as in the industry as kind of a thought leader in that particular area? So it was just curious as to, where that came from and the investment in building out all of that great content.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm glad you stumbled across that. And, since the beginning, it's really, we've been looking to spread awareness and shed light on the direct mail space to audiences who are maybe less familiar with the industry or who might view it as a more traditional service rather than, a necessary revenue generating channel. And so, we, like folks on this call, I'm sure, do believe that mail is an incredibly powerful channel for communication. And again, we really wanted to have a conversation. We wanted to shed light on the ways that folks can leverage this channel, for their businesses for maximum ROI, but also to really start thinking about, what is the role that sustainability can play in this? And it challenges us as well, right? We are constantly trying to, think about, what areas in our business should we be addressing? And so, in addition to thinking about, leveraging responsibly sourced materials and, making sure that we are, partnering with organizations around, very much aligned initiatives like reforestation and, renewable energy, we want to open up the conversation. And so really, what goes into thinking about these blog posts and the content that we create is just wanting to have a platform for that, getting to use, our audience and our platform to start to, again, shed light and drive awareness. But really, I'm hoping it starts conversations like this. Like, I think it's great to have these blog posts, but that's what they're meant to do, right? Is to drive the conversation. And, so we hope to continue to share more information so that, again, we can keep the conversation going. But, if folks have topics that are top of mind that we should start digging into, we are all ears. Or if there's something that we might want to collaborate on, again, I just think that this is meant to be a space for us to learn and share.
Excellent. And one of those things, when we talk about sharing and learning, we have, the print community and we talk to them on a regular basis. And we have some printers who are well invested in terms of environment and like ESG, environment, social and governance initiatives. And there's others that are just starting that journey. So if you were to, what advice, or if you were to look at, starting a campaign, for example, a customer's campaign, and they say, we want you to, consider the environment as you're creating this campaign from start to finish, where would you, recommend they start? Like, can you give us some examples of some of these scenarios, or, something that's more specific and more tangible that they could actually kind of, start tomorrow? Not they don't have to invest millions of dollars in order to make this happen. There are things that they could do within their environments today.
Yeah, I'm happy to go through a whole campaign, but, answering the question of where we would start, and Dave can go in through, to the operations of this all, but from the marketing perspective, I would first start with just the why and the what. Why are we sending this campaign? What is the ultimate goal and what does success look like? And, I think that's really important because, we need to understand, should we send this campaign? I think that's the first question, right? Like, what is the ROI going to be? And do we have to create a physical product that is going to go out in the world and use energy and resources if we aren't going to measure it? And so I think really defining the why is important. So you asked for an example. We work with we work with a customer who produces eco-conscious organic sleepwear. And so they recently ran a campaign to activate recent customers. And so, the why is that they wanted to engage these repeat customers, and the what is making sure that there was a measurable increase in activation. So they had a purpose for sending the campaign. And I think that's really important, is being able to define that. And so then, if I step into their shoes, knowing what that ultimate goal is, I think the first piece is really looking at data. And so, I want to make sure I'm looking at data to target the right audience. And in an ideal world, we're starting with clean data. So we have up-to-date deliverable mail addresses, correct names, and preferences for personalization. Again, you said ideal campaign. That's where I'm going with this. Like, we have clean data to start. And the reason I bring up the data piece is, from an environmental perspective, this is so important. There's this idea of dark data. And so right now, I think it's something, I was reading some stats recently that, like 52% of the data stored by businesses is considered dark data. And it actually, in a study, I think it was run by Veritas, it contributes to 6.4 million tons of carbon dioxide annually from dark data. And so again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of talking about data, but again, I think it's so important, one, that we have clean data, so we're sending and targeting the right recipients, but from an environmental responsibility standpoint, right, like we're not just housing data that is sitting there for no reason. So I think that's really important. And so then once, we've pulled the data and we know, who we're targeting, again, I think this is the big piece too, is, we've all seen the mass production of mail, and I don't know about you, but I kind of just toss that away because I see it and I really don't have any tie to it. But again, if we're looking at this through that campaign, we're looking at, again, customers who have engaged with us before, we know something about them. And so we want to make this personal. And again, it means that we're sending less mail, but it's more strategic and it's personalized. And there's, again, an ROI on it. So, in this example, I would probably, again, look at the data and then think about, okay, what is the creative, what is the postcard or piece of mail that I want to create? And I think we all know that personalization increases response rates significantly. I think it was one of the studies I was looking at was like 135% increase in response rate. So again, making sure that there's a purpose to sending this piece of mail. So if we're going back to the customer, I would probably, create a postcard with their name, making sure that it was, hi, Eleanor. And then that last pair of pajamas that you purchased happens to show up, right? So it feels like it was really tailored for me. So I'm more likely to interact with that. And again, when we're thinking about these campaigns, the next piece for me would be thinking about reporting on the success of that campaign. So it's the data that goes into it to make sure it's personalized and really relevant, but then also making sure that I know the performance of that piece of mail and the campaign that I'm sending. And so, I'm sure folks on this call have recently or, had conversations and, the prospect on their side saying, hey, I like mail. I think it's important, but I'm having a hard time measuring it. And so, especially in this current time, marketing budgets are being cut. And so it's important to be able to say, like, what is it that, how is this piece of mail, how's the campaign performing? And so that is super important too, is being able to report and measure the campaign. So that's another piece. So we're going back to data, and then again, being able to report on the success of the campaign. And then, I think really the next piece for me is then thinking about who you're working with. So you have the data, you have being able to measure the ROI, and then it's like, what is the vendor that I'm working with? What do the production facilities look like? Like, what are the materials being used to make the pieces of mail that are going into this campaign? So really being thoughtful and doing research on who you're working with, those raw materials, the energy sources, again, and Dave can speak to this even more so, are really important. But just from the high level perspective, that's one thing I'm thinking of. And then the final piece is, like, what is the form factor that I'm using? So I'm a big fan of simplifying mailers as much as possible. And so, I guess one of my first questions, and this comes from, I know we'll go into it later, but, we saw in our carbon footprint analysis that envelopes were really had a much larger footprint than other pieces of mail that we produce. So, my first question coming from a sustainability perspective is going to be, does this need an envelope? And for sometimes the mail, we know absolutely it has to have an envelope. But for a lot of mail, it doesn't, right? And so I think we can get really creative creative about the way that we are thinking about the form factor that we're using. So that was a long way of answering it. But again, step 1, clean data. Step 2, measuring it. 3, working with a vendor who is prioritizing responsibly sourced materials and clean energy sources. And then 4, like really being thoughtful about the form factor that we're using.
That's fantastic, Christina. And before I pass it over to Dave, just a couple of comments on, I love that you started off with data. Like we, I kind of post when we're talking to our customers and partners, we talk about the significance of data and the ROI of green. And it's amazing when you look at, the wastage in terms of undeliverable addressing, like just cleaning the data it's a simple step. And it's not just like it's the ROI of it, there's the cost of it as well as the environmental impact. So, that was really interesting to hear. And the other piece that I saw was simplify, I think it was simplify your mailers. And, when you talk about, that can reduce the amount of paper. And I'm not that I want to get into the paper discussion here and paper availability, because that's a really hot topic for this audience. But it's funny how that has caused creativity, I think, within the industry. So to your point, envelopes, I know some of our partners have found ways where they don't need to do an envelope, but I hadn't thought about the fact that that had a much higher carbon footprint, the envelope, than the paper, within the direct mail itself. So that was an interesting piece of insight that I hadn't thought of before. So thank you for bringing that piece forward. And then Dave, as we get then further down kind of the value chain of the creation of the campaign, would love your perspective on, what's the next steps in terms of materials and etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to agree as well too. I'm a firm believer is that all of these things start very far upstream in the planning stages of this, and that the data is the most critical thing that you need to look at. Can't emphasize that enough, because the importance in regards to a direct mail campaign or any marketing campaign, as far as I'm concerned, the 2 most important things are timing and relevance. And the last thing to make sure that your campaign works well is a clear call to action. And if you have those things together, you're going to just level up your campaign results and its effectiveness. Now, moving into the manufacturing part of things, what we want to make sure that we do, and I think that the print and mail industry has been really doing a lot of good strides in this particular space, and there's a lot of opportunities that are available to people as long as they avail themselves of some of these things. And so for instance, the first thing we can talk about is recycled content in paper. And in the paper supply, which yes is a very challenging thing right now. I absolutely everybody is feeling this pain globally. It is quite unbelievable. But what is important with some of these things, and especially around the raw material.
I think we.
Oh no, we lost Dave for a second.
I think we lost him for a second.
He was right. He was going too.
He was. Let's see.
We'll give him a second. I'll message him to let him know we lost him.
Yeah, I hope he's not still talking. I think he has a. But actually, as you're doing that, just on I can chat around, I guess, our perspective, and I'm just going to bring in, the thoughts around what you said on the upfront process and on planning and on data. And one of the things that we noticed, we talk about targeting and some of the consumer research that we received is, it was interesting that consumers didn't see direct mail as being wasteful if it had relevancy to them. So if it was relevant, they didn't see that piece as being wasteful. If it wasn't, then that's where they had a higher indicator in terms of that piece has more of an impact on the environment. So again, just substantiates the whole need for better targeting and more precise targeting. And then another piece, from Lob's perspective, I know the environment is people are very passionate about this topic. I think lots of organizations and companies really believe it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing as an individual, it's the right thing for the company, but we also looked at the commercial viability of why would you invest in it? And I saw a recent study not too long ago from Deloitte Global and Forbes Insight. And it was about the impact of sustainability efforts. So for all of the companies that are online today, like why would you, what is the commercial value to having a focus there? And the study was done of 350 executives across the globe. And the stats said, or the respondents said, more than half indicated a positive impact on revenue growth and overall company profitability. So aside from the right thing to do the environment, there's also the commercial aspect in terms of, is it something that, as an organization, we really should put some emphasis and some investment in. So I'm wondering, Christine, if while we're waiting for Dave to come back in, on the carbon neutral. So another piece that I saw on your website, you can tell I was in there digging, but there was, you recently launched the carbon neutral product. And the audience, or some of the audience member here, would be familiar with Prime Data's carbon neutral direct mail program. And it was part of a seminar that we hosted a few months ago, but you also offer that product out to customers. And I see Dave might be back on, but
My apologies.
Okay.
I just experienced a quick blackout. So,
yes, we weren't sure whether you were still talking and didn't realize it, or but
Oh no, I realized it. I went completely black.
Oh no, well, welcome back.
well, exactly.
My apologies.
So we'll park the carbon neutral piece till
Yeah.
till we were starting down another topic, but let's finish, Dave, on where you left off.
Absolutely. So, as I was saying before my power company rudely interrupted, is there are a lot of opportunities available to us that we just need to avail ourselves of in order to make a program or a campaign much more not only conscious, but environmentally conscious, but also what I would call renewable and recyclable. And there are tons of these options available. We can start with raw materials and talk about recycled content in paper, depending on what levels those are at. You can go everywhere from a lower content level to a higher content level. There are also chain of custody opportunities that make sure that there are companies, we're purchasing our raw materials and we're promoting a sustainable process such as FSC, SFI. There's a couple of them out there that make sure that all the way from the beginning of where we have responsible forestry through manufacturing and then supply chain delivery to the end customer. And then also, last but not least, the recyclability of the product once it gets out and it gets into the all the way to we will talk about cradle to grave conversations, and it's important to do this because the last part of this is I think it's important to make sure that we're creating economic advantages for these to function as well, because you have to have a marketplace for some of these things to exist and for that cycle to continue to move forward so that it is available to grow. So in other words, we don't want to just think about, oh, well, we'll recycle paper, but if there's no marketplace for recycled paper, it stops very quickly. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that those initiatives do have a continuing economic opportunity to grow. Same thing in when we start talking about other things that run the facilities, like electricity is a huge factor in any manufacturing plant. Making sure that we have renewable resources there, that we're emphasizing electrical generation from renewable resources. These are all things that we can make conscious decisions about supporting these economic advantages so that they can continue to grow and they will continue to receive reinvestment, so they become the norm and not the exception.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. And then, I guess one of the questions I have is from a customer's perspective, when they're creating their direct mail campaign, do you have customers ask specifically for you to make sure that, you find the most efficient way to create a direct mail piece and you use those resources that you talked about, the various types of certification and different types of papers? Is that becoming more of a request that you would receive in the last couple of years? Or, where do you see that going? Do you see, is the impetus really going to come from the customer, or do you think is it the onus on the our industry, the direct mail industry, really to kind of pick that up and put it front and foremost?
My feeling is that is both of those areas need to exist for it to really continue to move forward. I do believe that again, like I said before, we have a choice. We do have a choice to make. Okay, we all can make these decisions as to which direction we're going to go. We could talk about, like the power of the ability to put your money where your mouth is, kind of a thing, and say, hey, you know what, this is something that's important to me, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in this space. I have seen, in my experiences, I have seen that, this is also, there are customers that these things are important to as well. Often they are the drivers. They're going to say, if you have a customer who is more of a high profile or has a public profile, they may have initiatives internally that they're going to do. Everything from, what kind of paper do they print on, or what are their requirements? A lot of these, we do see a lot of opportunities with, printing bugs on paper that it was reprinted with recycled content or wind power or renewable energy. And sometimes these things can be put into a positive PR spin for them to be able to be. And a lot of them, just like us too, Lob has made a concerted effort to put renewable resources and sustainability in the forefront. And they want to make sure that they're doing that as well. So it's putting their money where your mouth is, and it's on both sides of that equation for it to be successful.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in there. We have I would say, it's been something that has been a priority for Lob, and we really, again, from our earlier conversation, we're trying to help set a new standard, to help really foster this conversation around, sustainability in the direct mail space. And we are seeing, with the rise of ESG reporting, especially from our larger customers, you'll see, especially, Fortune 500 and whatnot, who have public ESG reports, it is starting to trickle down to, requirements from their vendors and across their value chain, right? We show up in their scope 3 emissions downstream. And so, for some, they're trying to get ahead of it. For others, they're like seeing that they're becoming mandated to report on it. And so it's kind of both sides. To Dave's point is, we wanted to take a stand, but we're also hearing from our customers that that's really important for them as well.
Thanks, Christina. And, one of the blogs that you had posted, and I think Andrew may put the link up, if that's okay, in chat for all of the audience to have access to. But you had, I think maybe it was 10 things to consider as you're developing your direct mail piece. And one of them was, as I mentioned earlier, was simplify your mailers. I think you talked about data as well. So I would, if you look at that list of what you published, and you were kind of to pick the top 3, and other than data, because I know that that you've already talked to about how important that was, and simplifying your mailers, what are the other key ones in that blog that you'd like to call out to the audience? And again, I would encourage them to read it, but are there a couple that you'd like to kind of put some emphasis on?
Yeah, I'm trying to, so I know there was the 7 strategies. And so is this is the 10 strategies?
Yeah.
Post? Okay, I know we brought in an external person to write that one. So I'm trying to recall exactly what those 10 were. It was actually, if I could just quickly take a look.
It's okay. Sorry, this was off the cuff, so it was like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you doing some digging. I just haven't. I was actually on maternity leave when that one went.
Oh, I see. No problem.
But I'm assuming if I were just to take that question live, again, we talked about simplification and data. I believe in that. We also talked about again, thinking about the kinds of inks that were being used. Yeah. And then also ink coverage is big too. I don't know if that shows up in that, but there's a big difference between a piece of creative that is like completely dark and requires like every inch of that, mail piece to be covered versus, again, simplifying in a different way, right? We talked about simplifying in the form factor, but maybe even simplifying your messaging in a way that's still compelling and creative, but again, potentially uses less resources. So that's another one that I would call out. And then I think in that one, we also talked about, and this is something I can touch on as well, but asking if folks actually want to receive direct mail. And I loved the statistic you mentioned, Eleanor, earlier, because we just ran our own state of direct mail consumer insight study as well. And it's one with Compare Media. And we're hearing that people want to receive mail. And I think a lot of times folks like assume that it's a certain generation, but it's actually, I mean, when we looked at the different segments across, it was 18 and older respondents, 18 to 34, there was this, but like feeling that having a piece of tangible mail was a more real experience, because so much has become digital, right? And so I'm going on tangent here, but when I'm thinking about it, it's actually not seen as wasteful because people actually do, it's something that people want to digest and they crave. So that was another piece. And then one other thing that came to mind was, how to think about these direct mail strategies, like help the brands you work with know if your preferences. So if you actually would prefer paperless, let them know. But there are ways to, again, make sure that as a consumer, you're also communicating with these different brands. So like here in the States, you can write like refused on your mail and it'll get sent back. But it just allows, again, this is going back to data, but it allows folks to update their databases to know, again, who and what kinds of mail to send. So I'd have to look at the 10 strategies again, but those are the ones that come to mind for me.
Thank you. So then just changing topics a little bit, and it's on the carbon neutral piece of your direct mail program that you just launched. Just for this audience, I'd love if you could give an explanation as to what that product is. And then, what was the impetus to actually creating it? Like, what was the strategy, or was it built on what need did you actually take this to market?
Absolutely. So I'll start this and then I'm going to pass it to Dave to talk about reduction and whatnot. But, as I mentioned earlier, like building sustainable practices into our business and products has really been an intention of ours since the beginning. And so we've really continued to build on our efforts over time. So in the beginning, based on our size and scale, it was easier for us. It was, much easier for us to look at, okay, we know that we can calculate the amount of paper that we use. So we decided to plant 2 trees for everyone that we use, but that was meant to be just kind of that starting point. We know that doesn't cover enough. And so, we started with an ESG materiality assessment in 2021. So again, as Eleanor mentioned, environmental social governance. And so we worked with an external partner to identify our most material ESG issues. And unsurprisingly, product sustainability had come up as our most material issue area and where we had the greatest opportunity. And so from there, we worked with SCS Consulting Services to measure our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. We knew those would be minimal, and through that study, that was the case. And so, that's because we also don't own any of our printers or transportation. And so again, that led us to thinking about what is it that we can do with our product. And so, with SCS Consulting, we ended up running a cradle to grave product carbon footprint analysis for all of our product offerings. So for all of our form factors, so check self-mailers, postcards, letters, and envelopes. And so we did that in line with the greenhouse gas protocol product standard. It's a mouthful. And so we gathered raw material, print process, supplier, energy, transportation data from our print partners and our paper suppliers, as well as USPS on the footprint of the delivery of our mail. And also worked with the US EPA data to determine end-of-life impact. So that's how we got the entire life cycle. Some of the things that we discovered, and I alluded to this earlier, but the analysis showed that the product distribution stage really dominated the overall product carbon footprint, except for the envelope. For the envelope life cycle, the printing stage had the highest contribution to the overall carbon footprint, followed by the distribution stage. And so, while all of the different stages are really dominated by electricity use for all of our paper products. Again, the envelope is kind of that tangential one to all of those. It has a slightly higher carbon footprint due to the window on the envelope. And so it's interesting how something's what seemingly feels small, the impact that it can actually have. And so we saw that the energy usage is actually the largest percentage of our current footprint, which is why we decided to support renewable energy projects in addition to the reforestation efforts that we're working on. And again, this is really, when we think about the carbon neutral product, this is really one step for us. we don't want to just offset, but we're really focused on how do we reduce our footprint as much as possible over time, and only offset what we can. There are ultimately going to be things, as we all know, that we can't reduce, but we are committed to making that, as small of a footprint as possible. So I will pause there, and I'll actually pass it to Dave to talk about how we are thinking about reduction.
Yeah, that's a tough one to follow. Christina, you're just awesome at explaining all of this. I just want to point that out. But so now, as she was saying, like when we start taking these things going from, the digital into the physical world, there's a lot of considerations that we need to take into consideration for what we're doing and how we can maximize our opportunity to minimize our exposure to these things. And this is one of I'm going to say, the beauties of Lob, in the idea that we have a distributed print network. So we don't own the actual manufacturing facilities. We do contract out to other printers that are geographically dispersed across the country and in strategic locations that are going to help us be able to achieve two things. Number one, from a service standpoint, we want to make sure that we're delivering mail in a time frame. Timeliness, you heard me say it before, is an incredibly important factor in regards to these marketing campaigns. But the other thing that is actually also important too is that once we move into the physical, we're starting to talk about transporting some really big things. Okay, these are big, heavy pieces of material that are, ending up into a truck that are going to be moving to a facility. There is a lot of transportation that goes on with this. One of the jokes that I say for a long time is it's a little bit easier for me to move pixels than it is for me to move paper sometimes. So we definitely wanted to sit down and look at it and say, okay, hey, look, we can, and this is a part of our internal IP that we have. When we receive mail pieces, we're going to look at not just who can produce it, but what's a really good way to produce this. I want to try to produce this as local to the end recipient as I possibly can. I want it manufactured there so that then I'm not moving something from one side of the country to the other. I'm only moving in much smaller steps mileage wise, so that I'm not moving something with a heavy carbon footprint, such as ground transportation. So that's going to probably be one of the biggest steps that we're going to do. And then the other decision is in regards to our partners, we want to make sure that we're working with partners who definitely do have a lot of these mindsets also ingrained in them, such as making sure that they're utilizing, as we talk about, I'm going to surprise no one with this, that electricity is a huge component in regards to manufacturing. We want to make sure that we're having or pushing in that direction so that the facilities that are actually producing this material are actually contributing, again, back to creating that ecosystem that will continue to grow renewable energy for not just our industry, but for the society in general. And we want to make sure that those continue to grow and we rely less and less on some of the carbon building facilities. So these, again, conscious decisions on how we're going to manufacture these things is driving these choices that we make, and then also how we physically manufacture the pieces.
That's great, Dave. And I think it's great insights and to the print community too, in terms of, things that they have to consider if that's something as part of your thought process and how you select vendors and suppliers and partners. There are other businesses that will be going through that same kind of thought process, and I'm sure starting to build them into their, either whether it's their procurement, their e-procurement, or just their way of being conscious about the type of vendors and partners that they look at and where sustainability fits within their models, because it'll have to, similar values will drive, I guess, those relationships. So thank you for that.
Yes.
And I'm curious to, and congratulations on introducing the carbon neutral direct mail. I think that's phenomenal. Curious as to how that was received in market. Did it get did it get the attention that you hoped it would? What's been the feedback from marketers and the industry on when you took that out to, or you launched that in the last, I don't know whether it was the last year or so, but. Love to hear
Yeah,
that.
it's been fairly recent, and we have received really positive feedback from folks so far. I think that it aligns really well with the conversation around, ESG, and I think folks are more and more familiar with, the concepts and the reporting that comes from ESG, but also, to your point earlier, folks are choosing to work with more sustainable brands. And if we hadn't done it now, I'm sure that, in a year, we would already be getting pressure to start thinking about it, right? And so we are glad that we were able to be proactive and to get ahead of it. And that's some of the feedback that we're getting. There are some, potential SEC disclosures here in the States around climate impact reporting. And so again, I think it's going to become even more a part of the conversation. I think we tend to be a little bit more behind here in the States than in some other areas. So, I think it's welcomed in our space, but it's going to become more of a household conversation. And we're seeing that too, right? Across the board for most products. So positive so far, but, we'll continue to monitor it as well. And I'm sure we'll continue to be, pushed.
Thank you. And then I'm just going to ask Andrew because I know we were having some chatter going through our Q&A and also on the chat function. Is there anything that you wanted to call out, Andrew?
Yeah, sorry about that. We've been having a few hiccups with the chat, so all the questions have been coming in on the Q&A. So let me just go quickly through them. So we've got a question from anonymous attendee. So it's a bit of a long one, but I'll read through it anyway. So Jens Kroger, senior researcher at the Octo Institute, estimates that each digital search query emits around 1.45 grams of CO2. If we use a search engine to make around 50 search queries per day, this produces a huge 26 kilograms of CO2 per year. So that kind of captures the setting for it. But the question ends up being, when looking at minimizing the carbon footprint of direct mail, which often considered digital, does that evaluation consider the digital carbon footprint impact it might have?
That's a great question, and you're spot on. So we did not include that in our life cycle analysis. It definitely is a good point. One of the things that we're doing, with Lob is we've actually recently looked at how we can dedupe or make sure that there aren't duplicate files that are being stored, again, so that we can decrease the amount of data and the storage that we're using. But it is, when we're thinking about company operations, something that we will be looking at, but something that I appreciate you calling out, but that was not part of our evaluation.
So we have another question from Laurie Letendre, and I provided a little bit of an answer online, but I'll allude to that. So the question is, do you have any stats or blog articles that I can use to improve my argument to my clients? And because of the minor technical issue we're having with the chat here, we'll make sure to share those when we post the YouTube link. But so just for your information, I shared the best practices for direct mail marketing piece that we were alluding to in this, but then I also spoke to the point that we're actually collaborating with Toronto Metropolitan University Ryerson on a set of sustainable guidelines for direct mail collaboratively, and that will be published sometime in the new year. So just collectively, do you guys want to answer about any resources that you guys would point to specifically that people could share?
I can jump in. So we do have a couple of posts that I can share after this call. I'll have to pull them up. And I'm assuming when we're talking about making the case, is it making the case for more sustainable practices, or can you expand on what the case is that's being made here?
I can't. I mean, I can ask our
I'll make the assumption that it's sustainable.
I would assume it's
campaign,
probably, yeah.
And if I'm wrong, again, feel free to comment. But one of the things that we've relied on heavily, and I'm actually working on a piece. We haven't figured out exactly when it'll be published yet, but it's actually around this point, right? We're hearing this conversation, especially on the marketing side, and budgets are being cut given just everything going on right now. And so folks are really turning a critical eye to what is the ROI for every campaign that is being sent. And, you know, as we talked about earlier, you know, with this, we want to make sure that every direct mail campaign is measurable because it creates, again, less waste, but then again, has a higher ROI. And so, you know, a couple of the sources that I'm looking at is there's some really great studies around just current consumer trends. And so, you know, one of the things, and this again is very US based, but a recent USPS survey found that 56% of Americans are concerned with the environmental impacts of deliveries. So more than half of Americans care about the environmental impacts of their deliveries. And that 41% of them, that the environmental practices of the organization actually plays a major role when they're like choosing their delivery company. And so it's just showing again that consumers are thinking about this. And so this, I know that's a little more downstream than the question, but there are so many stats around how consumers are thinking about the entire value chain of each product that they're receiving. And so if you can differentiate yourselves as sending a more sustainable campaign, you're really feeding into the consumer sentiment, and there's a lot of data around that. So I'm happy if whoever it is wants to ping me afterwards, I'm happy to share some of the research and the data that I've gathered, but we should have a post coming out about that fairly soon.
Yeah, and I'd like to chime in too real quick and just say, like, there's, because this is always a very difficult conversation in these spaces sometimes. And I think I always like to try to say you want to have a conversation regarding value, not price. And, you know, that really is becoming more and more in everything you'll hear us talking about. And this is something that is I think the overarching winning conversation as opposed to the challenging conversation. Because if everybody only wants to talk about price per piece and what they're doing, you know, like that is a difficult conversation to be had because you're at a disadvantage to talk about it because you don't know what some of the information they have behind the scenes. Whereas value, you know, when you start bringing to value and like the things that we talk about, you know, making sure that your data is clean, making sure you're sending to the right people, making sure that you're getting the response that you want, and you're getting the customers, you know, these pieces are meant to elicit a response from the market that you're sending it to, that you're getting that expected result. That's the value to the marketer. Response is the value when they have a buzz or they achieve what they're looking to be able to do. That's the value of that marketing piece, and you want to make sure that the value of that piece is as high as possible, because the better that response is, the better the return is, the more likely they are going to come back and do it again because they've hit on something successful. So you know, my suggestion always within these things is, you know, drive to the value and what that marketer who is sending that piece, what is valuable to them, and deliver that, and it is a winning combination.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So sorry, just one last question because Christina brought this up. Christina, you mentioned pinging people specifically. What's the best way for anybody who's interested in engaging in a conversation or some communications for us to for those folks to get in touch with either you or David?
Yeah, feel free, and I won't offer Dave up, but feel free to ping me. I'm just Christina@lob.com, and I'm happy, whatever I can't field, I will go to Dave, but I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, or again, connect you with the right folks.
And I have probably what I think to be one of the best emails at Lob. I am Dave@lob.com. So very simple and straightforward, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's it for now. And I just, before we close, just want to thank you, Christina and Dave, for coming on the call today. You know, I think there's conversation. I know we could spend many hours talking about it, but it is such an important topic. And I'm sure the audience have got, you know, if they can take 3 or 4 things away from this conversation, I mean, that's all we hope for. But I know that there's a lot of great content that you went through, and you have a lot of great resources that you know, we could share with the group. So Andrew and I will take it away and work with you to see what we could send out to the audience. But thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And before we hang up today, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. There will be a brief questionnaire that we would like for all of you to complete just before you hang up on the event. Please, please, please complete it, because it really is what helps us figure out what are the topics that are near and dear to your hearts that you'd like us to, you know, to bring out to this audience again. So it's really, we do take the information that you provide seriously and really build our content around it. So please take a few moments to complete that. And also the session, as you know, was recorded and it'll be posted on our YouTube channel within the next couple of days. And it will go out to everybody who registered for the event. We'd also encourage you to share it. You know, I think it was, as Christina mentioned earlier on, like, this is really like, it's the industry that as an industry, we have to really work together to find the best solutions and solve for how we can bring sustainable mail out to our customers in the industry. So you know, if you could share this amongst your colleagues, we'd really like to do that. And then have yourselves or your colleagues sign up to our channel. And I think you click on the bell so they can be notified of any new content. So I think that's probably the easiest way as we bring out new content. You won't miss out on some of that, because I'm sure you're just like me, your inboxes are full. So it's an easy way to keep in touch. And finally, for all of you who are not members of Sustainable Mail Group, really, really would encourage you to become a member. You know, this is just one example of many events that we're going to take out there. It is really a community of people, and it's what's important to you is what we will, you know, we will bring that content and bring in guest speakers like Christina and Dave. And as we said earlier, just keep the conversation going. It's all about the conversation and sharing best practices. And, you know, I think that's a really good thing for all of us to do. So without further ado, I just again like to thank you all for being here this afternoon, and thank you for your attention, and have a great rest of day. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone, thanks for having us.